Good afternoon, dear members, industry colleagues, respected panelists, and friends from the media. A hearty welcome to all of you to today's webinar on Indian automotive market post-COVID-19 lockdown, organized by the German Engineering Federation, VDMA, with our knowledge partner, Euro-Asia Consulting. We hope all of you and your families and colleagues are safe and doing well. I'm Jamli John, and I'm based out of the Mumbai office of VDMA, and I'll be taking you through the initial part of the session. Before we continue, I'd like to remind all of you that you can post your questions during the session under the question section, and they will be answered during the Q&A. We are presently recording the session, and hence for security reasons, just wanted to keep you all informed about it. VDMA, the Mechanical Engineering Industry Association, was founded in November 1892 and is the most important voice for the mechanical engineering industry. VDMA represents the mechanical engineering industry with mostly 3,300 mid-sized companies, making it the largest industry association in Europe, and its members contributing to 78% as exports and 232 billion euro as production. Recognizing the very early significance of India as a future market for the member companies, India was the first overseas offices amongst the BRIC countries for VDMA. VDMA stands to be the only German industrial association having well-established offices in India since several years, with its offices currently located in Noida, Kolkata, Mumbai, and Bangalore. EAC International Consulting has been a knowledge partner of VDMA for several years. We are experts in strategy consulting with more than 25 years of experience in several industries in Asia, and have dedicated know-how in the global automotive industry. For today's webinar, we'll have a short address from Mr. Rajesh Nath, Managing Director of VDMA India, and this will be followed by a presentation from EAC, giving us an overview on COVID-19 impact, outlook, and key considerations for the automotive market revival. And this will be followed by the panel discussion and Q&A. Mr. Nath has been in synonym and face for VDMA for almost 20 years now. He has more than 29 years of experience working in various industries, both in Germany and India. He's accorded with the Cross of the Order of Merit, which is the highest civilian order from the German president for promoting Indo-German trade. With no further delay, I'd like to hand it over to you, Mr. Nath. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jamli. Good evening, esteemed panelists and speakers. Good evening, members and friends from the industry. Welcome to the panel discussion on Indian automotive market post-COVID-19 lockdown, being organized by the German Engineering Federation, VDMA, along with our esteemed partners, Euro-Asia Consulting, EAC. It is a proud privilege for us to welcome our panelists, Mr. Gunter Gucek, CEO and Managing Director, Tata Motors, Mr. Sanjay Kapoor, Vice President, Automotive Component Manufacturers Association, ACMA, and Chairman, Sona Comstar, Mr. Nirmal K. Minda, Chairman and Managing Director, Minda Industries Limited, Mr. Sanjeev Saxena, President, Automotive Division of Schaeffler India Limited. I also welcome our speaker and moderator today, Mr. Ashish Kumar, Partner at EAC, and Mr. Vineet Martin, Principal at EAC. Friends, 1 January lunchtime, in a car parts company near Munich, a worker turned to a colleague and asked to borrow the salt, as well as the salt shaker. In that instant, scientists have since concluded they shared the new coronavirus. The co-workers were early links in what was to be the first documented chain of multiple human-to-human transmissions outside Asia of COVID-19. COVID-19 has impacted more than 188 geographies globally, and almost everyone on this planet is directly or indirectly affected from its impact. The global economies face the most severe recession in nearly a century and could see up to 6% contraction in 2020. Due to this, many pundits have declared COVID-19 as the black swan of 2020. Friends, let us understand the term black swan to delve more on this. A black swan is an unpredictable event that is beyond what is normally expected of a situation. The underlying takeaways from this term are, first, these terms or these events are extremely rare, cannot be predicted beforehand, and come with severe consequences. Second, since they cannot be predicted, the only way to escape or reduce damage is to have a robust system in place. While battles against COVID continues unabated, leaders and strategists are also sensitive towards many opportunities that this pandemic presents. At global level, there is some indication that companies doing business in China are now looking to consider other attractive destinations. This also perhaps offers India a window of opportunity. India's automobile industry, contributing 7.1% share in India's GDP and providing employment to 35 million people, is the fourth largest globally by volume and was forecasted before COVID to reach US $135 billion by 2020 and US $300 billion by 2026. At the beginning of the year, the auto sector was already suffering in midst of a challenging economy. Compounding this, more stringent environmental and safety regulations, the growing popularity of shared mobility platforms, and cautious lending by banks and non-banking financial companies negatively impacted vehicle sales. Now, due to COVID-19, the challenges are compounded. As per experts, demand recovery can perhaps be expected around the festive season in the last quarter of the year, with growing consumer preference for cheaper personal transport. Two-wheelers with their higher rural share will likely be the first category to see a rebound. Should the government develop scrappage schemes and lower interest rates for vehicle loans, along with reduction in sales and road taxes, as seen across some Southeast Asian economies, these interventions could accelerate recovery. Despite the above challenges, considering India's comparatively low vehicle penetration, 110 two-wheelers and 32 cars per 1,000, combined with a young population, rapid improvements in road infrastructure, growth in rural demand, and possible introduction of entry-level passenger cars, the long-term perspective for Indian auto market remains attractive. I'm sure our experts would provide valuable insights into the challenges being faced by the Indian automotive industry post-lockdown and the way forward. Friends, these unprecedented times call upon leaders to think out of the box. I would like to conclude with a quote from Elon Musk. He said, "Constantly think about how you could be doing things better and questioning yourself. Hence, continually ask yourself what you can do to improve your approach, as there's always room for improvement." Thank you very much. As we go ahead, I would now like to introduce our speaker and moderator. First, I would like to introduce Mr. Ashish Kumar, partner EAC. Ashish has done his Bachelor of Engineering from Nagpur University. He's Master of Science BITS Pilani and Master of Business Administration in International Business from HHL Leipzig Graduate School of Management, Germany. He specializes in strategy, merger and acquisition, and operational excellence. He has been associated with EAC since 2005, with EAC Germany and India. And next, I would like to come to Mr. Vineet Martin. He's principal at EAC. Vineet is a Bachelor of Engineering, Mechanical. He has done his postgraduate diploma in Supply Chain Management. And since 2012, he has been associated with EAC, and his focus industries are the automotive and industrial units. So over to Martin now, over to Vineet now for his presentation. And before that, yes, first to Vineet for his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Nath. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Vineet Martin, and I'm a principal at EAC. So today, for the next 20 minutes, before we get into the a very important panel discussion with our esteemed panelists, what we thought is we give you a perspective of where we stand today, and we've spent time speaking with the industry stakeholders, especially the dealers, the suppliers, as well as OEMs. And we get a perspective of where we stand today and what really is required from three different perspectives: that's demand, supply, and innovation. And I would really treat this next 20 minutes really as a base to build up on the discussion that is planned for the next hour. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the current automotive market. I think we know about this, and we have gone through it, and this followed up with the financial year 20, which basically declined by about 18%. And Mr. Nath also covered, of course, we were facing quite a few challenges in FY19. The growth was already slowing down. But here the important part is the industry has actually grown at about 7 to 8% over the last 10 years. Right? And in the last year, especially, we were facing declining consumer demand, the NBFC prices, the infrastructure constraints, and of course the BS4-6 transition, which basically led to about 800 million euro worth of inventory. So splitting it down, if we now compare the passenger vehicle segment and the commercial vehicle segment, you can see that the heavy lifting was really being done by the two-wheeler segment over the years. But it is also important to know that in the FY17-18 period for passenger vehicles, we saw an upside in demand, especially driven by the ride-sharing companies. But from a commercial vehicles perspective, this was a key year, the FY19 period. We hit a milestone, which was 1 million units. But then in FY20, because of the challenging cyclical as well as the structural factors, the growth slowed down, and we are facing an extreme situation as of now. So from a passenger vehicle segment, what is also important to note is that the growth actually started to slow down in FY19 period as well. And the compact SUV segment, which really has been driving the growth in the sector, almost was flat in FY20. And from a commercial vehicles perspective, this is very intense. This is the most hard hit sector, and the sales have basically reversed for both passenger vehicles as well as commercial vehicles by about 2 to 3 years now, having lost close to 1 million units of sales in the period, in the last year. So this, of course, has an impact on the commercial, let's say the financial performance of OEMs as well as tier 1 suppliers. And we can clearly see the last quarter, it has basically witnessed a massive decline because of all the structural factors. When we talk about BS4-6 inventory, that it was leading to a lot of capacities which were unutilized. There were a lot of discount policies, which effectively give a perspective of what the financial impact was when we look at the BSE auto index companies. Of course, the impact is different for different OEMs and tier suppliers, but as an industry, this has been unprecedented in the last quarter. So in retrospect, when I talk about the 7 to 8% growth, this is exceptional growth, no doubt about it. But then we also need to understand that there are key demand hubs which have changed in terms of maturity levels. We talk about an Indian average density of about 200 vehicles per 1,000 people and car density of about 22 cars per 1,000 people overall. But the key important point is the demand hubs are really taking place in the tier 1 and 2 cities. And now when we talk about COVID impact, this effectively hits cities like Delhi as well as, let's say, Mumbai, where the demand was already at a mature level, and because of the COVID impact, the demand would further is expected to decline. But the tier 2, 3 cities are the key target markets when we look at the next years as well. So that was giving you a perspective of how the industry grew, the decline that we have faced, and the impact that has had in the vehicle segment overall. But now when we look at the FY21 status, when we start talking about March, when we talk about the automotive wholesales, we know that April was a zero sales. That is unprecedented. We basically lost, if we talk about April as May together, there's approximately 2 months loss of sales equivalent. We also have cars which have declined. On average, we used to target about 250,000 units, but we are looking at about 37,000 units. There has been a massive loss of jobs, which basically impacts automotive demand. 25% when we talk about salaried employees, these are, let's say, the passenger vehicles. The small traders are two-wheeler segments. So there's an impact on demand we can expect in the next couple of months. And finally, when we talk about the unfortunate labor reverse migration, this has a clear impact on our supply because this, let's say about 30 million, that is estimated, 70% of our workforce in the automotive component industry are from the semi-skilled or unskilled contractual labor. And here we have the tier 2 or 3 companies that are expected to be most impacted. So these raise a lot of questions, and these are across the 3 topics that I mentioned. We talk about demand. Yes, we speak about personal mobility, but which are the segments that are impact positive? And when we talk about the implications of the commercial vehicle industry, we have about 9 million trucks or 90 lakh trucks on the road right now, and they're running at about 50 to 60% capacity. So what impact does it have on the market? Of course, we talk about taxation as well, and we'll touch upon that as well. But then we have key questions coming up on the supply side, the upstream, downstream supply constraints, the daily wage labor reverse migration exodus, as well as the import dependency that we have. And finally, from an innovations perspective, and this is a topic which becomes very critical because we are in an unprecedented situation. And do we really need to focus on conserving cash, or do we need to focus on innovation? And if we are going to focus on innovation, what are the key opportunities that need to be prioritized? And then finally, from an innovation perspective, is this really a time for Indian companies to start focusing on positioning themselves from a global or Asian standpoint? So we spoke to about 50 stakeholders across the industry, and these are the inputs that we have gotten, and we estimated how the impact would be in this financial year as well. So on the let's say the inhibitors side, I spoke about the job losses, salary cuts from a demand perspective. This is clear. But then we also have, even if personal mobility picks up, we have the stringent financing prerequisites now. There are bankers who basically are curtailing their let's say, spend or loan approval processes for specific industries from where consumers belong to, like retail or hospitality, which are hard impact. And therefore, the outflow of financing options would be limited. Then we also have a large used vehicles availability, which becomes an attractive option for consumers. And of course, like I said, the 9 million vehicles that are already on the road are running on 50 to 60% capacity. So this would have a far larger impact. But when we speak about the growth drivers, we definitely see first-time buyers that are going to be hesitant about public transport. We also see a different set of consumers which would target a step down, or let's say a different segment of vehicles, because this is a time for personal mobilities. Kids are going to go back to school, and parents would want them to prefer using new cars, but it doesn't necessarily have to be expensive cars. So it could be less value added or functional cars which could do these jobs. And then we have the flexible PV subscription as well as rental options. You would say that it doesn't really impact the new vehicle segment, but the truth, let's say the key message over here is if the financing prerequisites are required, which in a way is a must because we had an NBFC crisis, we do not want a lot of crisis, and therefore the processes are stringent, but the interest rates have been brought down. So this becomes an attractive option, the flexible PV subscription models. Then we have the e-commerce businesses, which would drive demand for specific segments. And of course, we'll have the government spend on infrastructure, but we must keep in mind that this would be at a lower level because from an economic perspective, let's say the GST revenue would be curtailed, which would have an impact on the government spend as well. So overall, when we talk about both the growth drivers as well as the growth inhibitors, it's clearly more tilted towards the inhibitors, and we estimate about 30 to 30% decline in the overall automotive industry. Of course, this figure does exclude the three-wheeler market. So this primarily is the passenger vehicles, commercial vehicles, and two-wheeler industry. So what really is going to drive this sales up to 14 million or 15 million units? It's clear that the functional or less value-added vehicles would see an uptick, and these would be the key demand drivers. We see motorcycles and scooters, of course. Motorcycles is more B2B, let's say from a delivery perspective. We hear that B2B companies prefer motorcycles. Then, of course, there's the passenger vehicles, which is less than 12,000, which would see an impact. And then the LCVs as well as ICVs, which would drive the commercial vehicle segment. The very interesting part over here was the fact that online sales attractiveness it becomes clear, especially in the urban regions. So for two-wheelers, we have the pre-sales as well as sales potential over here through electronic mediums. When we talk about passenger vehicles, sure, we have the pre-sale segment, which consumers can use, but then it eventually comes down to trying the vehicles. And then the requirement is that the customer comes to the dealership. And the key question over here is, why can't the vehicle go to the customer? Do we really need, let's say, overheads when we are in a crisis situation overall? Of course, this does not work for the commercial vehicle segment because this is more demos focused, quite like the tractor market. And the digital attractiveness clearly comes out for two-wheelers and passenger vehicles in the urban markets. And then we have the used vehicle subscription. Of course, I mean, this is pretty much at the same level at for two-wheelers because of the lower cost of acquisition. But when we talk about passenger vehicles, it becomes critical, and this is an attractive option for new passenger vehicle buyers. And when we talk about market trends, so it becomes clear that due to this entire COVID-19 situation, there's the 28 to 35 age group in the metro and tier 1 cities really hold the sales effectiveness because they are the ones who are going to switch from public transport to personal transport. Then we have the tier 2, 3 cities. The key message that I told you about from a mature market perspective, the metros are getting more mature, and that's why we need to strengthen the tier 2 as well as 3 cities. Then we have the product and customer mix. Of course, the first-time buyers, including learners, would prefer, let's say, automatic vehicles, especially AMT. So we expect the 20% share that we have today to increase. And then we have the B2B customer mix from LCVs, the two-wheelers, as well as PVs from a subscription model to amplify. And finally, when we talk about taxation, we spoke about the smaller segments to be the real growth drivers of the numbers of vehicles sold. And when we look historically, they are the ones, let's say the less than 4 meter segment holds about 2/3 of these sales. And this segment already comes in the 29 to 31% GST plus cess bracket. So this, let's say from a taxation impact, this is a segment which is already growing and would continue to be the key focus regions for OEMs as well. But here from a BS6 perspective, as well as from an affordability perspective, the critical is the 1.2 liter engine. and that becomes critical for the next months as well as the quarters. So what does it mean, such a decline? So we basically are looking at the sales coming back to FY10 or 11 levels. It is an unprecedented situation where we basically lose out on the 10 years of growth that we have basically developed over the years, and it becomes extremely critical to implement cost protection measures for sustainability. The market is expected to start having an uptick from FY22 onwards, but these are situations that action needs to be taken care. So from a supply perspective, we are looking at different stakeholders across the offshore suppliers coming down to tier 2, 3, as well as the OEMs and new vehicle dealers. And as you can see, the risk is basically increases as you come closer to the customer, primarily because the overall diversification potential is high in tier 2 and 3 suppliers, because they can focus on less impacted non-auto sectors. But eventually, when we come down to the tier 1 suppliers, the focus really needs to be on the segments which are going to grow, or let's say which will continue to keep selling. And then eventually we will have to look at new revenue streams, after sales, new markets. And this is where it becomes critical for strategic alliances for innovations, together with OEMs, which now need to focus on retail sales. This has to take priority over wholesale sales. There has to be a clear connect with the consumers. And for the demand planning, it has to be scenarios based as well. And we also need new sales models, flexible subscription or financing schemes available, which will eventually grow the B2B mix for OEMs. And here it also becomes critical for stronger OEM strategic alliances. We see this happening in other markets, and the question is, how relevant is it for now, for the Indian market now? From an offshore supplier's perspective, I missed out on that point. I would just point out that the Indian electronics value chain, there's a clear gap, and this is a question that we would discuss during the panel as well, about the important point that how long are we back when we talk about developing the value chain. And this becomes critical because the import dependency is about 16 billion worth, and then we have about 50% coming from China as well as EU. So this becomes a critical point for discussion as well. And finally, when we talk about vehicle dealers, the dealers who we spoke with already have, let's say, started the financial year with a cash reduction of 10 to 35%. Now, does it make sense now that during this period, we have already been acclimatized to this whole digital process, that we leverage this and look for new digital opportunities that can reduce our overheads, especially for the two-wheelers distributors. And finally, when we talk about innovations, I think there are two key points that we want to take away from this slide. So on the left, you see the legacy automotive OEMs. We call them legacy because they're historic in nature. They're not developed over the past 10 or 15 years, because the newer OEMs, their R&D spend is at a much higher level. And on the right, you see legacy automotive companies. So just to give you a perspective, the global companies are global as it says it, but the Indian companies, we've considered Indian origin companies. So if you talk about tier 1 suppliers, we haven't considered companies like Bosch and Schaeffler, because it gives a perspective of the Indian origin companies by itself. So these are the two key takeaways. One, you can clearly see that the OEMs, the global OEMs, as well as global tier 1 companies, the R&D spend share of the revenue is at a much higher level. Of course, it's lower for the global OEMs, but when we talk about tier 1 companies, the gap is much larger. And the second point is, you can see that the global OEMs spend share is actually lesser than the tier 1 companies. And yet then you can give a perspective on the EBIT levels, because at a global perspective, both OEMs as well as tier suppliers, they're on same levels. But here, On the other hand, the Indian OEMs, the EBIT levels are lower slightly than the tier one suppliers. And this, of course, changes much drastically in these current times. These are 2019 performance figures, but it gives even more importance now at this critical stage. So the key question over here is, yes, okay, we can increase spending on R&D, but does it make sense for the domestic market, which I spoke about, is going to nearly half. So now the question really is, and this we can take up during the panel as well, that is it really time for Indian companies to also leverage the key, let's say, opportunities that are coming up overall from the clear mega trends of zero emissions, the seamless urban mobility, as well as connected mobility, because the hardware component is getting more and more commoditized. And when we talk about integrating middleware and software is when the margins start going up. And this is a question for Indian suppliers, that is this an opportunity that can be leveraged for a global as well as Asia positioning? Of course, this after all comes after, let's say, how cash stable we are. So do we need to plan or replan our capex as well? But these are mega trends which are being implemented in international markets. So overall, to summarize, when we look at the current situations, there are key points, key action steps that we need to take forward. And critical to survive, the key steps that we need to implement that are critical to survive include cost optimization, looking at newer domestic revenue streams, and of course, looking at the export markets as well. So these become essentially critical. And then we have the critical to win perspectives, which basically focus on accelerating R&D spend, which includes stronger OEM and supplier project-based alliances, cooperation, and replanning capex that we have planned initially. Does it come with R&D focus for a global or Asia position? And finally, we talk about de-risking China a lot, but the key question is, is the ecosystem prepared for taking over these opportunities? Average order values are more than 8 to 10x of what we are used to right now. Does it require optimal investments in automation, manpower reskilling? So these questions come up when it comes to companies that are basically cash stable and can use this as an opportunity to come out of the situation as well. So for the expectations for the fireside chat, which comes next, is basically what are the restructuring measures, the short-term course corrections, what are the structural changes that are expected, what is the OEM and OES collaborations that are expected, what is the future of Indian automotive market, and finally, getting back on track for the overall market, because it's not a question of will it come back, but it's really a question about the timeline. And then comes what changes do we need to implement in this timeline as we come out of this, let's say, decline period overall. So before I give it back to Mr. Nath, just a short introduction about EAC. We are a management consulting firm. We are headquartered in Munich. Focus on automobiles. We have about 100 consultants in our offices in China, India, as well as the European markets. And if you need, let's say, any support when we talk about the automotive market, please do feel free to get in touch with us. With that, thank you very much. And I give it over to Mr. Nath now.
Yeah, thank you, Vineet, for the excellent presentation, quite a detailed presentation. You gave us a good overview of the automotive industry and the challenges that are being faced presently by the industry. And I think especially the slide on R&D spends was very interesting to see, compare the Indian industry with the global industry. And also you mentioned about the global mobility trend. So I think you really set the tone for the panel discussion. But before we go to the panel discussion, friends, we would like to conduct a poll. And may I request the poll question, please? Let's have the poll question. So the first poll question is how to stimulate domestic automotive demand. And here are the various options. and let us see what is the mood of the audience and what does the audience feel, how these domestic automotive demand can be stimulated. We'll just wait for a few seconds for the response from the audience. So can we close the poll now and see the results, please? So friends, as per the audience, how the domestic automotive demand can be stimulated, the tax structure reduction, GST and road tax, that is, I think 28% of the respondents are looking for that. And then this is followed by flexible sales model, leasing, subscription models, very interesting. Then pricing, I think this puts pressure on the OEMs. And then we also have the vehicle financing, the ease of vehicle financing, and then the product offerings, perhaps more expanded product offerings, and digital sales push. So thank you very much, audience, for sharing your views on this. And now I would like to hand over to Mr. Ashish Kumar, partner at AAC, to take forward the discussion and to start with the panel discussion. Over to you, Ashish.
Thank you, Rajesh. Good evening once again, and I would like to warmly welcome our esteemed and highly experienced panelists over here. We have Mr. Günther Butschek, CEO and Managing Director at Tata Motors. In his previous assignments, Mr. Butschek has also served as the CEO and the member of the Group Executive Committee at Airbus, and preceded by over 25 years of experience at Daimler AG. And his last role within Daimler was as the president and the chief executive of Beijing-Benz Automotive Company Limited. We have Mr. Nirmal Kumar Minda, chairman and managing director, Uno Minda Group, a $1.1 billion group. And Mr. Minda has more than 3 decades of experience in the auto component sector. He has also served as the chairman of ACMA, Northern Region, followed by the vice president in 2016 and the president in 2017. He's also held multiple positions within the Confederation of Indian Industries as well. We have Mr. Sanjay Kapoor, chairman, Sona Comstar, and also handling the ACMA vice president position. Mr. Kapoor is heading Sona Comstar, the flagship company of the $600 million Sona Group. He is also currently the chairman of CII Haryana State, as well as the co-chairman of the Manufacturing Council at CII. And we have Mr. Sanjeev Saxena, President Automotive at Schaeffler India, since October 2019, and in his previous experience, he has been associated with the Minda SAI and Minda Stonebridge as in the information and connected systems as the CEO and the managing director as well. Mr. Saxena has also over 30 years of experience in the automotive and consulting industry, and has also been very deeply associated with Delphi Automotive Systems in India, Singapore, as well as in China. And his last position with Delphi was as the managing director for the Indian operations for the Packard division. So a hearty welcome to all the panelists. With almost 86 days since the lockdown started and more than 370,000 COVID cases in India, and still counting, there is no stopping or clarity on what's next for the Indian economy, for the industry, as well as for the 1.3 billion people. To talk about automotive sector specifically, there is no precedence to the current situation. But we have to fight it out and need to maintain an optimistic spirit, as we always have. So today it's not going to be just I would say not just a panel discussion, but we have a huge gathering of audience over here who are here to seek your guidance as well as your advice on what to do next. So before we get started with the panel discussion, a just quick reminder to all the audience over here that they could post their questions in parallel to the discussions, which will be taken up later. So let's get started, gentlemen. And Mr. Butchek, I would probably start with you. I think let's maybe reflect on the current situation at the moment. What would be the key consequences for the coming from the lockdown for you? What are the major restructuring plans you are having for the organization, and what are the key challenges do you foresee in the current situation?
Ashish, thanks a lot for getting me into the panel discussion and also giving me the opportunity to participate today. First of all, compliment to the speakers. They have set the perfect scene for this conversation, rich in statistics, but from my point of view, much more important, rich in food for thoughts as far as the way forward is concerned, accepting the current situation, not losing too much time in order to find an explanation of what has recently happened to the industry, or better to say, to the Indian economy, as far as the drop in GDP was concerned, which has impacted not only our business, but which has actually gone across the entire industry landscape in India. But as you would normally expect from a German, if he gets a straightforward question, that he gives a straightforward answer. I think that's at least the general cultural expectation. I would like to actually go a little bit around in order to tease the conversation with the panel. And allow me, although it was not covered by your question, to make a reference to the poll. Because the poll has actually brought exactly the result I have expected, but it has actually brought the result where I'm of the opinion we can possibly expect the least as far as the way forward is concerned, while at the same point of time it's an indication that we have possibly used the 85 days of the lockdown to actually seek for somebody's support, instead of taking the 85 days as an opportunity to self-reflect and to introspect and to actually re-engineer our business, our industry, and to optimize our own work. We have all learned one lesson. That's about the importance of safety. I would say it was possibly not on the top of the priority in the recent past. And we have also understood that safety is not only a question of employees, that safety has multiple dimensions and actually needs to cover the entire ecosystem. We have learned that we always stated that we are agile, that we are flexible. But if we ask ourselves how much we have invested as an industry in alternative scenario planning, in order to have a plan, a second plan available, a plan B available, in case assumptions would rapidly change. And we have seen lots of these changes at multiple times. I was recently asked, what is your conclusion on your 4 years completed in India? And I said, India is the most dynamic market, and my life the last 4 years has actually felt like a roller coaster. Because whenever I thought that I just completed the one loop, I was already in the next looping, and it was extremely difficult to actually stay on course. And that's the important part why we need to learn. And this is not limited to the OEMs. That's actually a message to the entire ecosystem, that we actually need to plan alternative scenarios where, due to the dynamics and the amplitude of the changes, as we have seen it in the recent past and as we experience it right now by the impact of COVID-19, we actually need to pay much greater attention to enterprise risk management which is treated by lots of us, or have been treated by lots of us, as a kind of formality, because it is requested according to the governance. But this is actually the backbone of the way we run the business, and we actually share responsibility for the entire ecosystem. But talking about the consequences of the lockdown, the consequence of the lockdown is that even the ones who were of the opinion that we have good control on our cash, because I assume all of us have taken significant measures for cost conservation. I claim that we introduced already in the midst of the economic crisis around mid of the last calendar year, a cash tower, where I used to say that we have not paid attention to the rupee that much. We actually paid attention to the paise, because we turned it several times before we finally committed to spend in order to really keep control on the cash as the need of the hour. But the ones who actually saw that they had a robust system in place to master the crisis as we were in till the 24th of March this calendar year, I think we all have learned that life can actually get worse, and that what was considered a robust process is all of a sudden where we are now, where we have seen 3 months without revenue, is an extremely demanding situation. And if you then feel accountable for the liquidity situation of the entire ecosystem, and that's possibly something we need to discuss since we have a fair representation of OEM, but also of suppliers, then we all of a sudden have a complete different discussion than if it is just about a question how an individual company can conserve its cash. This is a huge impact as far as the future is concerned, because you have read about our this week's results last fiscal year. You have heard about our commitment to actually improve the cash this year by 6,000 crore. You have read about 1,500 crore of committed cost savings, and we even talked very openly about significant reduction as far as the investment is concerned. So some might ask the question, is it just for the short term and has the future been taken into consideration? I would state we tried to strike a fair balance, but with such kind of drastic deterioration against the initially taken assumptions, a cut to a third of your initial investment is not going to be without any impact. Yes, there's one area where we might be able to invest more than what we had initially planned. That's digitalization and data analytics. We have put lots of effort in this regard. We changed the organizational structure. We have now a corporate data analytics team, and we are about to actually reimagine the entire front end in passenger vehicles, as well as to seamlessly connect the customer experience in CV by a digital solution. And coming to the collaboration between the suppliers and OEM, I think we need to take this opportunity to review our collaboration. We need to jointly identify opportunities to become more resilient. At the same point of time, we need to identify opportunities, although the market forecast doesn't look too promising, in order to build scale. But at the same point of time, due to the vulnerability and the volatility of the current situation, where we literally don't know how the situation is going to look like the day after, we need to actually become, as an overall system, much more agile. But that requires a different way of collaboration, a different degree of exchange, a different degree of transparency. And we possibly have to take something that did not even exist at Tata Motors 4 years ago, as far as the S&OP as the backbone of the entire value chain is concerned. We need to put lots of joint effort in a robust, almost daily exercise of aligning the demand against the supply in order to allow us to be most efficient. And most efficient also means that we actually run our business with a lower degree of stock because if cash is important, building stock with high commitment of working capital in the currently given environment is an extremely difficult proposition. And to complete, I think we need to put our heads together in order to think forward, because as I said at the beginning, as you self-reflect the situation, you will actually discover lots of opportunities in the current environment. The famous words these days, vocal for local, which is also, and getting your supply chain decomplexified, so to say, is an important issue in order to make us as an ecosystem much more robust for the future, to leverage the real potential of the Indian automotive industry, not just in order to leverage the local demand, but also to get ourselves on the global map, where we can play a different role in the future if we can really get the act together, and if we get to a common agenda and not to a widely spread of individual priorities, which will not give us the degree of scale that's required to commit investments in the future readiness of the Indian automotive industry.
Right. Right, Mr. Buchek. I think we have, let's hear it out from the component manufacturer's perspective also. We have Mr. Minda, Mr. Kapoor, and Mr. Saxena. So, Mr. Minda, the same question for you. How would you reflect on the current situation post-lockdown, and what are the major restructuring measures you are taking within your organization?
So first of all, thank you, Ashish ji, for this opportunity to me. And I would like to greet one of our esteemed customers, Mr. Gunchar, and my esteemed panelist. So thank you very much for this opportunity. So speaking to your question, you know, there are different challenges, and I think we are learning. And the most important is the new way of thinking are required, new skill. Agility, as Mr. Gunter said about the agility. So agility at this time is very, very important. And then out-of-box thinking, you know, as you know, it was mentioned in the beginning of the speaker. So, and the action of there are short-term action, there are medium-term, and there are long-term. In the short-term, mainly, you know, on the cash flow area, how can we, you know, reduce our expenses, our variable cost or fixed cost? Is there any opportunity? Reduce our inventories, reduce the break-even point. With all that, you know, we need to keep on thinking where are we now at our break-even point. For this, you know, as I said, the new way of thinking is that we need a collaboration with the supplier fraternity. So we in ECMA, you know, about 25 suppliers have been meeting since the COVID started quite often, maybe on a weekly basis, and share very freely our ideas of the cost reduction, you know, what can we do, and learning and sharing from each other, which is the need of the hours. And then continuous improvement. And the first and foremost challenge is the safety and the health of our employees. As we all know that employees at this moment, they're all in the fear. We are all in the fears. So how can, at this moment, to keep higher motivation of an employee is the utmost importance for us, because they must feel secure. We have not done any layoff. We have not done any, you know, wage cut of the operators and all that. So motivation, keep high motivation of the employee is the key, you know, goal for us. Because it is not a short term. We all know that this situation will disappear by Q3 or Q4, but we should not take any action which will be, you know, spoiling our goal for the future. And as I said, one is the cost reduction initiative, cash preservations, and then questioning by ourselves. And there are challenges, as we know, with the COVID, to maintain with the COVID norms. You know, the SOP, the guideline laid by the government, SOP made by us, we have different challenges in our shop floor. you may know the terminology of takt time and cycle time, they have reduced because of the customer demand. So we have, and to have a social distancing with the new takt time and cycle time. So with the social distancing, you know, very, very difficult to maintain the productivity level. So cost is increasing for that some time. How to mitigate that cost? So low cost automation is one of the challenge area, we look at it, how can we do immediate return on investment of the low cost automation. And sustainability, is again the key on whenever we do any changes, how do we sustain? Process change is a possibility. Is there any way that we can change the process? Skilling, the shortage, one of the challenges, shortage of manpower. We all know people have migrated, and now people have started coming back, but still we do not have in the contract labor in the auto component sector in us and in the tier 2 and tier 3, mainly a balance of 60-70% is operator are permanently, but balance are temporary, around 40%. How to manage? Those are not available. So skilling, we need to spend more and more time on the training and skilling. So, and then put them on the job, because in this tech time, cycle time, skilling, with all the challenge, there are always a possibility of slippage of, quality. So quality, to keep up the same quality as before COVID is the biggest challenge. So we need to have a multiple inspection in the beginning. So I think this is what I'm talking about more on the shop floor side. On the business side, the cash and break even, there are many, many ways we are doing on the fixed cost also. And each and every head, each and every rupee we have started looking, is it really necessary? And we have revised our budget, let's say for different scenario, we made it. So first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter at a different scenario. So, so we do not land up in the cash shortage situation, and our debt equity should not go up drastically. These are the quick update from my side.
Right, Mr. Minda. Thank you very much. Mr. Kapoor, would you like to add to what Mr. Butchek and Mr. Minda just mentioned?
Sure, Ashish, thanks a lot. I think both Mr. Butchek and Mr. Minda covered most of the ground. I just want to say that in this crisis, we're really solving for solvency. That's the key measure here. We've gone into a situation where we've faced zero revenue. I don't think anyone has ever planned for zero revenue. And really, it's a matter of solvency. I don't know where the market will end up. I don't know what buying habits will be, where our expectations are very high at the end of this year, Q3, Q4 of the financial year, for us to come out of this. However, the key drivers, in my opinion, are cash, labor, and raw material. And,
it's 5 o'clock.
These are the key drivers for any business in this situation really to survive. Cash, as Mr. Minda rightly said, do we have the liquidity? We've been very fortunate in the Indian supply chain to have been paid by our OEMs on time, in full, which has allowed our supply chain to remain the way it has and remain solvent. There's a big change from what happened in 2008 to now. We've seen fewer bankruptcies or fewer near bankruptcies than we did in from 2008 to now. That's also because people built robust businesses, also because I think OEMs understand what it takes to run a complex supply chain like ours, and therefore they've been very forthcoming, and we've been fortunate that they've paid us on time. So this has been great from the Indian OEM perspective. Labor, we have this issue with migrant labor, and this is a real issue. Whilst, different macro, data shows that there are 500 million workers and 4 or 5% or 10% has gone away, I think we're really facing a problem with labor. And Mr. Minda rightly talked about skilling. I think there's a great opportunity in skilling as well as a great challenge. What we're doing in our business is really forcing ITIs to graduate people earlier than normal so that we can bring them back into the business, because labor is becoming a challenge as demand goes up. Currently, the demand is low. We know that from the Indian perspective. Our business is 65% export, and therefore, our export demand is pretty strong. The United States is much stronger than what we had expected it to be in terms of numbers. Farm equipment has grown even in the Indian scenario. So, that's something that's of great, that's a great bonus for us. And you're right, as the slides showed, commercial vehicles will take a little while. Passenger car will come back quicker than commercial vehicles. So, labor being a big issue. And then with labor and skilling comes the whole issue or the advantage or the opportunity of automation. What we had planned to do has just been accelerated. We talked about digitization. This is a huge, and Mr. Bushek said that, this is where they need to invest. And that's absolutely right. With 5G coming in, with the opportunity to digitize, with the opportunity to, this is what we're doing now is a completely digital. And we didn't think that this could happen. And this has happened overnight. With that, of course, will come cybersecurity, et cetera. And those are longer discussions to have. And my third point is raw material and supply chain. And how do we maintain our supply chains, our tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers? This, of course, has been a challenge. However, I'm happy to say in our own supply chain, most of the suppliers are still, solvent. They're doing well. They're well funded, not high debt. And, here's an opportunity now to bring in more technology, bring in joint venture partnerships, et cetera, and see what we can do with the supply chain. India today in the component industry is a net importer. We import $17 billion worth, whilst we export $50 billion. And I think our aim is to become a net exporter. CII is very clearly laid out the guidelines for growth being private investment, consumption, net exporter, and government spending. Private investment has to happen. You've seen the R&D graph, and you've seen the kind of investments that we need to do, going forward if we really want to create a base, manufacturing base in India. And I think we have the potential to do that. Several companies have invested in R&D in the component space. I think several companies will continue to invest so that we can make this a true, a manufacturing hub. It's not going to happen on price alone. And again, price alone is not, labor cost is not going to be an advantage once everyone automates or moves to Industry 4.0. The West will become as competitive. So we need to realize these things as a component industry. When you look at consumption, of course, is there an opportunity for demand creation? So far, and you saw that in your poll, what the consumer is looking for is a GST reduction, which will help create demand creation. We've talked about scrappage policy that should hopefully help demand creation. That's something that we need. And then, of course, government spending. There's various packages been announced for MSME, et cetera, which have been positive. So I think from an overall perspective, it's pretty similar. I echo the same thoughts as Mr. Minda and Mr. Bushek, that's really my input. Thanks, Ashish.
Right, Mr. Kapoor. Mr. Saxena, would you like to add?
Yep. I would try to be pretty brief on this. See, as far as the consequences are concerned, I think they're pretty well covered. Yeah. One thing I just want to point out is that nobody had ever thought that we would be transitioning to BS6 amidst the lockdown. So that has happened. That is both an opportunity as well as a threat, because the costs have gone up, everybody knows, but we also know that there is a inventory in certain customers. There are low inventories, and that's where there is a good incentive to build up. Another thing that we at Schaeffler believe is that though we are a multinational company, but we are also listed in India. So we have obligations to both the Indian stakeholders as well as our mother company. The first thing we did at the beginning of the lockdown was we sat down as a team. We tried to look at what are the scenarios. We built the optimistic, likely, and the pessimistic scenario. And we went as long as up to the 30th of June kind of situation. And during that time, we set for ourselves a minimum performance expectation. And that minimum performance expectation was agreed by what we call as our executive leadership team. And we all committed to that and started working on that. As the lockdown progressed, things started opening up around the middle of May. And I always believe that luck also favors those who really help themselves. So due to our diversification in industry, tractor industry really started picking up, and there's a good momentum which is building up there, which is helping. At the same time that we have looked at on our scenarios, there are three things which stand out very clearly. Number one, mentioned several times, is liquidity. Yeah. We are from liquidity position. Schaeffler India is in a very good position, and for a long-term sustainability, we are looking at how we're going to maintain that liquidity position. So We are looking at our, Mr. Minda mentioned break-even point. We are very critically looking at our break-even point and the constituents and trying to bring it down. One thing which we did was when we did our cost analysis that 85% of our cost is coming from various sources apart from fixed ones. The major one being the material cost, and that is where we are working very closely with our suppliers, design partners to make sure that we make a significant dent there. Unfortunately, the moment the structural cost word comes, people start thinking about people cost, and that is something which we are avoiding at Schaeffler India completely. We are supporting people. The well-being of our people is the prime importance, and any cost measures which are related to people will be the last resort. And as of today, we are somewhere between likely and the optimistic situation. Also, one thing we should believe is during these trying times, the traditional wisdom will not help. What will help is getting adapted to the situation and act decisively and act in the best interest of the organization. There are certain costs which have gone down in any case, like travel, advertising. Those costs have anyway gone down. So it's a silver lining on the sky, but we are looking at each and every aspect from the structural perspective, short term as well as long term. From a capex perspective, since we are a technology company transitioning into BS6, a lot of investments were needed. So we are making sure that those investments go ahead because that's for our survival. All the technological investments are still going ahead. As far as capacity related investments are concerned, we are trying to leverage our global capacities and not duplicating capacities in other countries. So in short, those are the measures that we are applying at Schaeffler India.
Right, Mr. Saxena. Thank you very much. Thank you to such a, let's say, start we have. A couple of things which came out very clearly from all of you. I mean, liquidity on the top. I think cash liquidity has been a common statement from all of you. Another important point is the employees, the health, safety of the employees. Good to hear that there are no pay cuts or layoffs happening, at least so far. Then we talked about, yes, indeed, there is a labor situation, whether we talk about migrant labor or a scaling topic over here. Very interesting input which came from Mr. Kapoor as well as Mr. Saxena regarding the exports as well as the diversification, that how if companies are completely dependent on the domestic demand, how risky it gets. So I think going forward, let's probably take a little bit step deeper into some major structural topics which we think should be taken. Which are the necessary structural changes the industry should be taking up to get out of this vicious cycle and to kind of get adapted to the new normal? Yeah. So Mr. Butchik, what would be your view, let's say from a sales perspective, that what are the key changes do you expect in the customer behavior post this current situation, and how do you expect the sales could be stimulated? Some key measures, what do you think would really drive demand locally?
That's the multi-million rupee question as we speak. Yeah. That we try to understand the change in customer demand, and at the same point of time try to form, call it a picture of how the demand could develop. And I think much more important for all of us, how fast the demand is going to revive. What we do see, just on the basis of lots of interactions during the lockdown, because it was the need of the hour that we don't disconnect from our customers, neither from the customer base, and that's a statement valid for passenger vehicles as well as for commercial vehicles, nor the ones who actually raised pre-COVID interest in a product of Tata Motors. When you can delete Tata Motors, I think that's pretty much a statement valid for the entire industry. And we also try to stay in touch with prospective customers on the basis of the references we had. So I think we have been heavily engaged virtually and digitally, not necessarily with the primary interest to convert these customers' interest into a booking, although an online booking platform would have been available. Is what was much more interesting to get our own first-hand information from our as potential future customer base of what are the sentiments, because we have all seen it. We have received all kind of reports. The consultants were pretty heavy mailing their latest insights in our industry. We have agencies like Crystal who did frequent updates, but the shelf life of some of the updates was as short as 2 weeks when they actually came up with the next correction, unfortunately always to the worse, so far not to the better, but we wanted to actually get it firsthand. If I do extract some of the learnings or the regular feedback we got, can be summarized in the passenger vehicle business as following: that we can expect a customer's interest or customer demand at the lower end of the pyramid, where we all would have safely stated till post-COVID on the basis of last year's or the last couple of years development, the trend is going to go to above 4 meters. The trend is going to go into 4.3 meter segment of SUVs. This trend will remain, but possibly on a lower basis as a percentage of total TIV. But where we do see a stronger demand is at the bottom of the product portfolio. So the entry and the mid-size hatchbacks, because that seems to be at this point of time still considered as an affordable entry. But what we also do see that the expectations some of the customers do have, expectations represented by affordability, spend capability, also gives an additional hint. And I mentioned it already last year, the annual CM convention, and we had several discussions with ACMA. The new entry is going to be, as it is the case in most of the developed automotive markets, is going to be the used car business. Something which we have largely left with the unorganized sector, and recently with some of the online platforms. But if we really would like to build customer relationship, and where we would like to build a business which is a business of replacements and upgrades, then we need to pay as an industry much greater attention to the used car business, because this is where you actually provide entry solutions. And if you provide entry solutions with certain guarantees in terms of quality, in terms of, mainly in terms of quality and affordability, then you can also build your new car business on it. Because with all the regulatory requirements in terms of emission norms, safety requirements, I do believe what customers got used to as an entry will not be affordable and will not fit in the future in most of the pocket sizes or the envelopes of budget available. And the customer in India will remain largely, call it budget sensitive. So therefore we need to rethink the way we play the game, not just in order to serve customers short term, but to actually build a much more robust business model for the future. And this is one of the key lessons learned. The other one is, I'm not going to add that GST reduction would help in scrappage policy, you name it. But the other element is that we also need to put ourselves in the shoes of the customers. And that's what we did on the basis of the learnings from all of the recent contacts and the feedback obtained, to actually come up with different financing schemes, much more tailor-made financing schemes. So not one fits all, but you need to fit all. The one with an upfront payment, the other one with a balloon, the other one with low EMI, the other one over the tenor, a low EMI, extending the tenor period from an average in the past of 4 years to possibly even go as high as 6, 7, 8 years, with a required degree of flexibility, to make replacement offers in a later stage as the situation is going to recover, as the uncertainty as far as employment and disposable income concerns of the customers today will disappear. And then you can actually get into it. And if you have a solid used car business, this could actually give you in the years to come significant business opportunities. As far as the commercial vehicle business is concerned, as mentioned earlier, this whole crisis hit us at the wrongest point possible in time, because the BS6 transition in CV in commercial vehicles is a different transition than in PV. Because in PV it was all about the fact there is a BS4 and tomorrow it's going to be a BS6. Customers to get used to the higher cost of acquisition, us trying to get to the same contribution margin over a certain period of time. But in commercial vehicle business, customers always have profitability. Their total cost of ownership in mind. Cost of acquisition is an element of it. Total cost of ownership is not just a hypothetical, theoretical kind of calculation. This is something customers would like to experience. So all the measures which we had in place, giving the customers to experience the new vehicles, to do back-to-back trials, to see the advantage as far as the improved fuel efficiency is concerned, and to prove, despite higher cost of acquisition, below the line a positive business case by replacing the vehicles, upgrading the vehicles, has completely been damaged. So therefore, all the effort that was in place could not be executed. This effort still needs to be brought because in CV, transition to BS6 is not a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is something where you actually need to put lots of effort in the market in order to make it happen. So this is largely the framework in which we can drive demand. Yeah. And if we get some tailwind, because government might find an opportunity in its budget constraints to give a dedicated support to us as an industry, may it be by GST reduction, may it be by a scrappage policy, but please, not that we pay for the scrappage policy, then we also need some support. This comes from the government because they don't have the pockets which would be sufficient to actually fund the scrappage policy, because the basic assumption is we are going to be the beneficiaries, so therefore we should also be the ones who pay for it. I think this is something where we need to continue the dialogue in order to strike a balanced deal, which is in the interest of the industry, but also in the interest of the nation, as far as an upgrade of the fleet is concerned, for the benefit of lower emission and higher safety standards. But this is a larger discussion.
Yeah. So, Mr. Minda, from a structural change perspective, are the component manufacturers looking at de-risking their business models? I mean, from over-dependency on the automotive sector?
No way at all. I would say that this is the time, as I said before, it is the time to look at focus on your core business. We have enough challenges. If we start looking here and there, we already, as Mr. Sanjeev said, that CapEx, we are already looking at our CapEx, where to spend, where not to spend. We do not want to spend CapEx for the very long-term payback, but as I said before, for the immediate return. So we definitely not looking for any other opportunity, but there are enough opportunity, as Vineet mentioned in the beginning in his presentation, and as Mr. Gunter said, because for us, OEMs are our customers, so we have to follow them. We have to follow their volumes, we have to follow their supply chain schedules, and so on. And we have to be agile and flexible to have minimum inventory at our end and minimum inventory at their end, and also in minimum inventory in the transit. But there are opportunity in our ample number of opportunity in our sector itself. The first and foremost is the localization of all the imported parts, wherever our customers are importing those parts, how speedily we can develop those parts in the collaboration with the OEMs. Many of us have adequate technology, but if some technology need to be brought, we can arrange through our customers or on our own. So that is the first opportunity. And the second opportunity, as Vineet mentioned, the localization of imported parts, though it is very, very challenging and, difficult, but as you might know that in India, we have very well done for the chip design and the EMS manufacturing. But however, for the semiconductor, we have not been able to do a breakthrough. And the main reason for that is the huge investment of minimum $3 to $4 billion. And there are 170 manufacturers of electronic semiconductors in the world, and they have huge size, so there are depreciation costs and then so on, and they are very, very competitive. So highly competitive. So in order to become our Indian, Atmanirbhar and so-called Make in India, the government need to intervene here and look for the 3 to 5 years, some kind of subsidy in different area, so that, we can be cost competitive on the electronic component, since we use and we import a huge lot of electronic component from China, Taiwan, and Korea, etc. So these are the, opportunity we have in our own sector. So no need of, and I would recommend, at this point of, particularly this year, if anybody looks for any diversification, all that, he will be, cutting his leg in his own leg in the near future, I would say.
Right, Mr. Minda. Thanks for a very straight answer over here.
Ashish,
yeah.
Ashish, if you don't mind, because what has just been mentioned by Nirmal, as a conclusion of our conversation today in the afternoon, and possibly considering what could be potential future steps, I think the automotive industry and the supplier industry, once represented by SIAM and the other side represented by ACMA, if there's an area that requires that we join hands, then it's exactly the question Nirmal has just addressed. What are these technology areas where it's all a question of investment, but it's at the same point of time a question of scale, and where we will only get to the scale effect never by any of the individual players. We need to join hands in order to identify these areas, and then we need to jointly draft a strategy where we put full focus together on it. But it actually starts also something Nirmal has mentioned. It actually starts with a shift from make in India to designed in India, because we first need to invest in the engineering footprint, in the engineering capability, where sometimes I feel sorry for some of the suppliers who have actually invested in it, expecting that it would actually get huge demand on the engineering capability. But due to the fact that our manufacturing footprint as an industry is much stronger than the engineering one, this is where we actually need to sit together to see what are the areas where we would like to engage with the suppliers with a different concept of collaboration in a different way, so that suppliers who invest, so the front runner, so to say, that they are not going to be short at the end of the day, and where the upfront investment turns into fixed cost because there's no sufficient demand for such kind of engineering capability on the way forward. And this is what we also need to discuss as far as future technologies are concerned, in the context of, as I mentioned, vocal for local. This is just a slogan, but in order to look what it means and how do we translate the slogan into action, requires lots of concerted effort in order to make it happen.
Right. So very well said, Mr. Buchek. I think this also could trigger formation of some smaller working groups, whether this is part of SIAM or with ACMA, to really trigger this discussion on a much wider level. So moving forward, Mr. Kapoor, you mentioned that you have almost 60% plus of exports business. Do you think in the current situation, exports could really be a saving grace for component manufacturers like your company?
Yeah. So Ashish, I'm going to, just answer this question as well as your last question, because it's a very appropriate question, because in 2008, when we went through the downturn, we all looked at diversification into different industries. And I think we learned very quickly that we're best at automotive manufacturing. And as Mr. Minda rightly said, if we stick to what we're good at, and we keep doing what we're good at, we'll become better at it, and this is what we'll do. Having said that, there's a lot of opportunity, as again Mr. Minda pointed out, within the auto component industry. One thing that Mr. Buschek said in his opening remarks also was data analytics. Data analytics is going to emerge as a new business opportunity altogether within automotive. So, when you look at CASE, the connectivity, automation, shared mobility and electrification, when you look at that abbreviation, I think data analytics is another aspect of the automotive industry. So there's a lot of diversification that can happen within automotive, and within the supply chain. Localization, of course, again, as Mr. Minda mentioned, is a huge drive, investment in R&D, etc. To your point of exports, I think, yes, there is a great opportunity, again, that we're sitting on. It's not going to happen based on price alone. I continue to say this. It's not, the government has to make it easy to do business in India. So ease of doing business is the government's responsibility. Our responsibility as component manufacturers is to bring the technology. We have got business in India that we've stolen from Chinese manufacturers, and we're shipping out to the US because of technology, not because of anything else. So if we don't invest in technology, in R&D and technology, we're not going to be able to leverage the export opportunity that exists in India. And that is a great opportunity. We've heard about talks of business moving from China to outside of China, but we're not the only ones competing for this business. The rest of Southeast Asia, Mexico, all these countries are going to compete for this business. So how do we bring this business to India? Again, it's our investment and capabilities in R&D, the ease of doing business, and obviously a good price would definitely help. As far as Germany goes, I know that the Germans are very comfortable dealing with China at this point in time, so I don't know if a lot of business will move from there. However, there are other countries that are looking at it, so that could be another opportunity. And again, because of the fact that we have invested in R&D, because of the fact that we do get involved from black box design in terms of with OEMs, I think we're sitting in a good position now to export that product out of India across the globe.
So, Mr. Kapoor, you talked about this. We all are hearing a lot about this de-risking China topic. Do you think the Indian supplier ecosystem is ready for those kind of volumes, the scale, what we are talking about here?
I think, Ashish, we can build it. I don't think it's going to happen overnight because it's not easy to move supply chain from across borders. I feel that, again, as Mr. Buschek said, if we can work together with the OEM and build that volume play, make that investment in R&D, these are the things that are going to have to happen. The government is working on creating export champions as well. The government is very keen on working with us, with ACMA, with CIAM, with CII all together to see how we can create export champions, how we can build businesses that are actually front-facing and pulling business out of China if that opportunity comes our way. It's not an easy play. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. Do we have the capability to? Yes, we have the capability in India to scale up to that level if given an opportunity. And again, I'm going to keep stressing, we need to invest in R&D as component manufacturers. We need that push.
Mr. Saxena, quickly coming on, we talked about the strong import dependency, especially when we talk about electronic components, right? And I think all of you are, let's say, significantly impacted by this particular topic. And on one hand, we talk about this local for local business model. So how do you see going forward this to develop?
Okay, before I come to this question, I have a few thoughts on the previous comments which you made.
Right.
So let me just very quickly share them with you. Number one, as auto component manufacturer, I firmly believe that we cannot generate in the short term demand in the market. That will be done by the OEMs, but we definitely long term can help the OEM by helping them reduce the, Mr. Gunter also mentioned about total cost of ownership. I think that is where technology and companies like us come in, who will definitely contribute towards long-term total cost of ownership to reduce that. Number two, better performance. That's another area which can be talked for the sales pitch. One more thing which we believe and we talk about very often is that one of the things that needs to change in Indian parlance is that automotive passenger cars are still considered to be sin products. And when I say sin products, all the duties and taxes and everything is at the top level. So that is something where I think between the component manufacturers and SIAM, we need to repeatedly knock on the doors of the government to ask for some relook of the policies there. It's a mindset change, won't happen overnight, but definitely it is required to be done. After all, automobile is today an essential commodity. Coming to the economic activity, which is you were talking about, there will definitely be a shift toward the lower price cars and so on and so forth. So that's where what we are also working at. Also, the e-commerce and financial services and digital consumer journey and interfaces, they will also play a very major role. The most important thing here is the OEMs which are having a dialogue with the customer. I think that's very important to have a dialogue to explain to them what does it mean, what is the total cost of ownership, what it means for them in the long run. Also, with the advent of this used car market, people are now becoming very conscious about the resale price of the vehicles. Those are some of the things which are very important, must be taken into account and dealt with. Coming directly to your question now, which was on electronic industry. See, in 2018, it was an unprecedented year. The demand was through the roof. Electronic components were at a premium. And at that time, it was a rationing of electronic components. Actually, we saw that happening all across the world, and to a very large extent in India. That was primarily due to the shift of certain manufacturing facilities, upgradations, and so on and so forth. So when we talk about specifically for the electronic sector, I think Mr. Minda also mentioned about the investments and also the cost. I think these are two things where something will have to be done drastically if India is to go into that category, in that kind of manufacturing. So I don't foresee that particular thing happening in the near future. But there are other avenues. One of the things which I learned during my stay in China was that one of the things where we lack is productivity. I think we need to tremendously improve our productivity and what I call as the say-do ratio. If these two things are improved in India, I think there is a very good chance that we can give any country the run for their money. Government policies and all those things being equal. So also coming next to about the collaboration that we were talking about, I think for the tier one customer, it is extremely important that we look for opportunities together rather than stay competitive. Competitive in the sense that be in competition. So it is extremely important that we also talk together. We also find ways how we can add more values to the customer. And also another thing which is unique for Schaeffler India, and here Mr. Minda mentioned that people will be cutting their own legs if they diversify. Fortunately for us, we are a 50% auto, 50% industrial sector company. So here we don't have to diversify. We already have investments in, and we are now balancing very well both our activities in these two sectors.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Saxena. On the structural block, I have one last topic, which could be a little special topic regarding pricing. I mean, we know that the stocks have been lying and the inventories are getting accumulated, because of which very aggressive discounting policies are visible in the market, which further deteriorate the margin quality over here. What is your view? How can this be regulated, especially in a situation like this? And that is where, I mean, one would expect that the associations or the government is intervening and kind of, playing a role over here to balance it out. Mr. Günther, would you like to speak on that?
Who was laughing? Nirmal, I think you were laughing. You should actually give the answer on my behalf. Or you could contribute to my answer. No, it's a difficult one. Look, also for structural reasons, as far as preparation of the transition BS4 to BS6, but also the weakness of the economy, the subdued demand we have seen in the meanwhile for the last 2 years, till the end of the fiscal year for 1.5 years. The industry has literally spoiled customers' expectations, because as the industry as such switched too late from a push to a pull approach. So that means shifting focus from wholesale to retail, setting the wrong incentive as far as the market share calculation on wholesale is concerned, and not stopping the pipeline and training on dealers' profitability by having too much stock with too much committed working capital. At the end, the customers had 2 leverage points, desperate OEMs to sell the stock, and desperate OEMs to actually get to the lowest possible stock by the end of the last fiscal year in order to facilitate the BS6 transition. So with all due respect, and that goes across the industry, to a good extent, a certain piece of the extended downturn of the industry we have seen the last 1.5 years was also to a certain extent homegrown, because we wanted to ignore the market reality. We ignored that customers had a certain degree of uncertainty, and that the subdued demand was not just cyclical, but also structural in nature. So we now have an opportunity to actually bring the market reality back. The market reality is now no longer overshadowed by a transition from BS4 to BS6. We are now in BS6. The market reality is unfortunately overshadowed and influenced by COVID, but as I said at the beginning, that also gives us the chance to rethink our business model, to actually come with new schemes for the supplier, for the customers, like subscription models, leasing models, a different kind of financing schemes. And we need to rethink about our product portfolio in order to give customers the opportunity to find a different entry point. Is pricing the right approach? Pricing, as it was, I assume, part of the question, are you ready to grant higher discounts? If we continue to actually buy customers' preference by just discounting the products, where the entire industry have not yet been able to recover the investment and the higher technology costs associated with BS6, then I think we are hugely going to compromise on this industry's ability to actually build the future. Because we have heard several times, Sanjeev mentioned it, Nirma mentioned it, Sunjay, so the entire representatives of the supply base have been saying there are huge investments required, but if we don't protect the contribution margin and profitability of the OEMs, we will not be able, not even with the strongest concerted effort, to commit these investments and to make this industry less vulnerable to the volatility of the market and to improve our global competitiveness. So therefore, playing on price is, from my point of view, the worst option, because we have been playing far too long and we have spoiled the customers by discount levels, where the customers need to arrive in the new reality, in the new market reality, where the list price serves as a purpose and financing schemes, service and experience going to make the difference.
Right, Mr. Vucek, very well said. I would really love to continue having this discussion, but I think I'm also looking at the clock in parallel now. The last, let's say, question, which will be for all of you gentlemen, and I will start with Mr. Saxena. Mr. Saxena, I mean, we have talked about all these structural changes, sales, supply chain, R&D, all these things are, let's say, briefly discussed. What do you think is the time frame you would give for the Indian market to start coming back? I mean, normal is a big word right now, but when do you see it happening?
Sanjeev, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, yeah. Yeah. First of all, we'll have to define what is normal. At Schaeffler, we have defined normal to be the 2018. So that is when we will say that we are back. And our view of the market is that the market would be coming back to normal, and it is segment by segment. So let me talk about passenger vehicles first. We look at FY24 to where probably the market will be same level at, and provided nothing else happens.
Yeah.
And then when we talk about the CV industry, I think there we'll have to wait a little longer. That's very cyclic, and as Mr. Guntur also mentioned. So we'll have to wait a little longer. Two-wheeler will, in our opinion, will remain a black horse. Due to the very fact that the shared mobility is going to be shunned for the next couple of years, and two-wheeler is a very attractive mobility option. We think that we are underestimating two-wheeler when we are saying they will go down by 20-25% this year and come back to by about 20% this year. Another theory that we have is that in this year we have lost about 3 months of sales. Subdued market also, even if it's subdued next year, we will have those 3 months extra. So from the timing perspective, we will have some margin extra, which will get built on. Now, looking at 24 for pass car and mostly 25 or so for the commercial vehicle two-wheeler could be a little earlier also. We at Schaeffler India, we are now working till date in the past 25 years, we have already grown twice at the rate of the market. And that is something which we want to maintain at our cost. And that is what we are looking at. I can already see some smiles there, but that is what we are looking at. And we very firmly believe that we should be able to come back to 2018 level, at least for the automotive, by FY22. We should be back at that level. This is on the strong, not just on the demand, but when the BS6 changes have happened, we have had several business wins. Our pipeline order book is extremely strong, especially on the technological product. There has been several failures in the market, where we have built on the weakness of the competition. And also their technological products held by the upcoming CAFE norms and also from the IDE norms. That is where we think that we should be able to grow much ahead of the market.
Right, Mr. Saxena. Mr. Kapoor, the same question for you. What is your perspective on?
So Ashish, I'll say two things here. One is on your earlier question on pricing. I think what we need to focus as an industry is on costing and not on pricing. Just as earlier speakers have said, break-even cost has to come down. We don't expect the OEMs to ask us for price discounts, and we don't expect to ask the OEMs for price increases. I think it's a fair game. We're in this together. I think this is the first time we've come into a crisis where we're all in the same boat. Sorry, as one speaker earlier said, I heard earlier this week said, we're all in the same storm, but not in the same boat. But however, it's important for us to, realize that we're all in the same storm and we need to work together and collaborate. And I think it's an issue of bringing costs down, not price. To your second point, I can't accurately guess anything in terms of when the market will turn around. This is a very dynamic situation. Farm equipment is doing well. The rural economy is doing well, and therefore passenger car sales will increase because of the rural economy. As I earlier mentioned, tractor sales have already increased. So we're hopeful that this will continue. However, if something happens, if there's another lockdown, there's another scare. I read there's another phase 2 in Beijing. Now, I don't know. The situation is very, very dynamic. We're planning for third and fourth quarter of this financial year in terms of pickup in demand. However, again, we're also very leveraged because of we're not very leveraged just because of India, but we have the export market, etc. So we're in a different situation. However, the local demand, I don't know. I mean, I can't say. The talk is of this third and fourth quarter of this financial year. However, it's anybody's guess.
Yeah. Right, Mr. Kapoor. Mr. Minda, maybe some quick words from your side. You're on mute.
Yeah, I am. I'm okay now. So somehow I'm quite optimistic Yeah, I know that we have lost these 3 months, but I would say that in Q3, Q4, or even we have started catching up in different segment at a different pace. But maybe by this year end, we should be down by around 20-25% of the in comparison to 1920. And maybe in the Q4 may be better, or we will be catching up the same as Q4 of 1920. But definitely for next year, we will definitely catch up 1920 or better. Since we are far below the per capita car of, maybe the underdeveloped country also in many cases, or two-wheeler, or so we have big, huge, opportunity, provided our GDP continue to grow, our infrastructure continue to grow. So I'm quite optimistic as far as the Indian automotive sector is concerned.
Right, Mr. Minda, thanks for your words. Mr. Buchek, maybe we conclude this question with you. What is your take on the market development? When do you see it coming back?
That's not a good idea, because we have already exceeded the time significantly.
Yeah.
And putting me on the track, what my view is on the future, I would like to say the following. I would wish on behalf of all of us to have the crystal ball and to come up with some predictable forecast as far as the future is concerned. Since such kind of crystal ball obviously doesn't exist, it's not even available for money, I have actually given the following theme to my team. We prepare for the worst and we pray for the better. If this could possibly be the theme which we are going to take forward along the lines discussed, that we need to get into a stronger collaboration, where we need to actually align the entire ecosystem, where we need to put lots of concerted effort in as an industry in order to leverage the opportunities, because we are the masters of the future. We are the engineers of the future. We can't put our head in the sand and saying, let somebody fix our problems. As Suncha very rightfully said, it's not a pricing game. That would be detrimental for us as an industry. We really need to leverage the cost side with a concerted effort, and we need to become, as far as our products as well as the product offerings, all the way from digital experience to different kind of financing and ownership models. We need to reinvent this piece and need to become much more attractive in front of the customers. So I think there's a long agenda, a long agenda with lots of opportunities. And if we join hands, the results will be mutually beneficial.
Thank you all for this very interesting panel discussion. It's been extremely insightful, not only for me, but also I think for all the audience over here. I would now hand it over for the last block. I'm not sure whether we are able to take any further Q&A, because I think a lot of questions have already been addressed during our discussion in the last, I think, almost an hour now. So I would hand it over to Mr. Nath. Thank you once again, gentlemen.
Ajay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ashish.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you, all the panelists also. I think we had a very interesting and insightful discussion. And there are lots of questions that have come up. Certainly, we've got more than 60 questions, so we would not be able to take the questions, but we have a poll question actually. And maybe we can quickly take the poll, and if you allow me 5 minutes after the poll, maybe one question I would just like to briefly put to the panelists. Can we have the poll question, please? So the poll question is, until when do you expect automotive demand to return to 2018-19 sales level? So 2022, 2023, 24, 25, or beyond 2025. So friends, let's see what the audience feels. We had some input from the panelists, but just let's quickly see what the audience feels about when the demand for automotive industry is expected to return. So maybe we'll shut the poll now, and can we have the results of the poll, please?
22 डाल दे.
Oh, so friends, 22, majority of the people feel 2022, followed by 23, 24, and 25. So I think here the this thing was for majority was for 2022. I'll quickly just address one question to each of you. Mr. Butchert, one interesting question. Do you think EV and autonomous driving will pick up globally post-COVID? And the second part of the question is, without China's cooperation in supplying components for EVs, will the growth of this sector in India be hampered?
Could you possibly repeat the second part?
So the second part is, without China's cooperation in supplying components for the electric vehicle, will the growth of this sector in India be hampered?
Let's actually start with the first one. You know that we have literally taken the bet on the faster adaptation to electrification. That's a valid statement as far as the buses are concerned, where we have become one of the front runners, claiming a significant lead in the market. And it's the same also on the passenger vehicle side, where we have applied a very careful, balanced approach, saying we go for conversion in the first instance, as it was the Tigor, then for an integrated conversion solution as far as the Nexon is concerned, applying a new standardized modular structure of the electric powertrain solution as it will be applied for the future, in order to build even on a low volume with low investment, a first step of scale, because we actually bring standardization in the early phase of the journey to electrification. And at one day, but I think that's sometimes in the future, we also need to think about going for dedicated electric architecture. So we are very clear, as we have also made the step addressing the fleet business in the first instance. That was the Tigor short range and then longer range. And with the Nexon, we have now demonstrated our willingness to also get into the retail customers. And the feedback pre-COVID was very encouraging. And I assume, but it's much too early to judge, that the feedback on electrification is going to be even more encouraging, because we all have experienced the situation. As a colleague of mine recently said, Günther, how shall I explain my daughter that the sky over Delhi is blue? So I think the pollution levels we have seen in the recent weeks is encouraging. And if we assume for a second that the new normal doesn't mean that we go back to where we actually got into COVID, but that we also take the opportunity to introspect and to see what kind of changes could be performed. And we can join hands, coming back to the collaboration with suppliers, to industrialize, to localize most of the key components, to become, your second question, independent of the Chinese, driving the cost advantage, which we do have if we can build scale in India, and can actually boost electrification by having better offerings for the customers. I think electrification can possibly be one of the growth factors in the years to come. And I was asked pre-COVID, could you imagine a 25% adaptation rate to electrification in 2025? Coming back to the poll, that might happen even earlier if we really join hands and if we give electrification the rightful place as far as our joint priority of investment is concerned.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Butchert. Coming to you, Mr. Minda. Actually, there's been a lot of apprehensions in the audience because we have spoken how the auto component industry is dependent on China. So with the events of the last 2 or 3 days, Mr. Minda, and the growing tension with China, so people have asked, would that impact the auto component industry also and the business with China, Mr. Minda?
No, not at all. Not at all. We only imports, mainly in the auto component sector, mainly the components like electronic parts. And that too not from China. We have a very, well settled supply chain base in Taiwan, Korea, and the other part of the world. So that is point number one. And we do import, some of the parts like alloy wheels or some other by the OEMs. So there I would say it is an opportunity for us, for the auto component industry to, as I said before, for the speedy localization in the very, very strong collaboration with our OEMs customers. So I don't foresee any risk in the China for the auto component sector. We are self-sustained.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Minda. Coming to you, Mr. Kapoor, it's a very interesting question. How to manage imported inventory obsolescence for end-of-life products, which is likely to result due to volume softening post-COVID and also no uptakes from OEMs during lockdown?
Wow, that's a loaded question. You're talking about inventory of imported items for
absolutely
like programs.
Right.
You know, I think this is a discussion between the supplier and the OEM. This is not a straight answer that I can sort of give you a solution to. This is a discussion that you must have with OEMs. And I'm saying this, and I said this right in the beginning, and I'm not just saying this for the sake of it. OEMs have been very supportive in this time. Every OEM, especially the Indian OEMs, we've had good conversations with them. They've been extremely supportive of the supply base. They understand that the supply chain is extremely complex. Even one shop shutting down is going to impact every OEM, not just one OEM. So I think they understand this view, and fortunately, a lot of OEMs and joint ventures have been through difficult situations in the past. This is not the first time they're going, yes, this is the first time we're facing a pandemic of this nature. However, have OEMs and have other joint venture partners been through rough times in Japan or in Europe? Of course they have. And they understand what it takes to bring the business back into normalcy. So I would say this is clearly a negotiation or a discussion between an OEM and a supplier. Thank you.
I think speaks of the healthy relationship between OEMs and the suppliers. Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. Last question, Mr. Saxena. During the discussion, on one hand, there were a lot of talk about conserving cash. Now, innovation needs investment. So how would this balancing act be done? Conserving cash as well as companies like Schaeffler need to innovate also.
Yeah, I think that's an extremely important question. And companies like Schaeffler, we develop our technologies mostly centrally. And we aim to continue our expense of 5% plus. That has been there for the past few years. We intend to continue that at a global level. Add to that, in India level, we are talking another 1.5%, which will continue because we think that is for our future. And for any technology company, it is extremely important that they do not shy away from the investment on the technology. At the same time, you have to be very careful what kind of technologies are you investing in. So at Schaeffler, we have already taken some steps into e-mobility. Of course, all of that is central. We don't intend to duplicate manufacturing at each and every country. It will be on the economies of scale. And we are also working on certain, somebody mentioned ADAS and driver comfort and so on and so forth. Those are the things of the future where we are investing in big time. As far as India is concerned, we are also looking at India as a design house, making sure that we have design capabilities here in India and try to feed the world. In fact, just before this COVID, we had big plans where we would have had a few hundred engineers here working for the Global Design Center in India. That is something which will come back. Definitely, it will come back. But I think that is something where we'll have to have a much broader view. And technology investment, R&D investments for us will have to have at a global level. And I can assure you that they will be substantial. On that, another thing that we think is that when we talk about investment, we need to keep our feet on the ground and heads in the cloud to see, make sure that we have a long view and also we know what is the ground reality. Another thing is that as we go along due to these changes, we'll have to improvise in certain areas, which we will. The most important thing is to act on your plans, have solid plans, and act on them. So that's
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Saxena, for your feedback and for the initiatives being undertaken by Schaeffler I would like to conclude, friends. Times are difficult, no doubt. But he who shows resilience, he who shows determination, and he who shows foresight shall come out of this successfully. I would like to conclude with a Sanskrit shloka from the epic Mahabharata, which says, Yato dharmastato jaya, where there is adherence to right action, there alone lies victory. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, all the speakers. Thank you, Ashish, and thank you, all the participants, for joining us for this webinar today. And wish you all the best. Stay safe, stay well, and above all, stay optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gunter.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody. It
Have a
was a
great
lovely
evening.
event.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Stay safe.
Stay healthy,
Thank you.
stay safe.
Thank you.